Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. Happy hump day to everybody out there. We've got Chris Harrison explaining why he attended Colton Underwood's wedding. We're going to listen to what he had to say on his podcast. What's it called? The greatest, the most dramatic podcast, whatever. We'll get into it. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals for stand-up show updates. I'm going to be announcing my Nashville show, which is, I believe, May 29th. It's a Monday, but I'm going to be only in Nashville for a few days, and I've got June 6th and other dates in New York City. Plus just finalizing Seattle, I believe, end of August. So lots to get into. Follow me on Instagram to get those ticket updates. Also, this morning, like every morning, we've got the Patreon live stream, patreon.com/Dave Neal. And also this afternoon, Bachelor Rush Hour, the podcast. I can't believe the numbers it's doing. Just really, a lot of people have been tuning in. What I'm doing is I'm giving you 30 minutes every afternoon. The first half of the podcast, the first 15 plus minutes or so, is all original content. That's brand new stuff you'll never hear me say anywhere else. That is just for you guys. And then we always take a featured clip from the YouTube channel and then put it on there. All right, so let's get into it. Here's what Chris Harrison had posted. He had posted, "Congratulations, Colton and Jordan. We were honored to be there for this spectacular celebration of love. Like I said at the wedding, I finally completed my job. For much more on the wedding, check out a special, the most dramatic podcast that has dropped." Yeah, I mean, hey, I don't blame him for shuffling people over to the podcast that got us there. He's monetizing a wedding, and that's fine. Do whatever you got to do. Anyway, some people had commented things like, there's obviously a lot of hate going around for Colton because people feel like he didn't properly address exactly what went down. Of course, we know leading a deeply closeted homosexual life, which again would not be a problem unless there's collateral damage, in which case he actually did something illegal, which allegedly was place a tracking device on his ex Cassie Randolph's car. So people are still commenting, didn't you completely gaslight a bunch of women on 2 different seasons just to get famous and then went and became a stalker to the girl you chose? Yeah. Gross. People calling him a criminal and a stalker. We've litigated this a million times over. I think 2 things can be true. He didn't fully address what actually went down, but he's trying to live a happy and authentic life. I choose to look at the probably most optimistic view of what Colton did, not to sort of relive it and not to say that it was justified, but I do believe he was lying to himself, even though he had already downloaded Grindr and had experimented. He was trying to be straight. He was trying to say, if I can win this show and be this type of guy, I can go on that lifestyle. And then it all came crashing down. And of course, that's where he stands now. Let's go to Chris Harrison and see what he has to say about attending the wedding
of Colton Underwood. Colton and Jordan got married this weekend in Napa Valley. We were honored to be there to support them and celebrate and dance.
Baby, you danced so much.
Gotta dance.
So much. That's one thing I love about you. I don't care if you're a bad dancer.
So first of all, that kind of she is leading the witness there. She's like, look, you might suck at dancing, but you still did it. So participation trophy for you.
But you got to dance at a wedding.
I'll
and
go
I
for
can't be with someone who doesn't dance, and you do. By the way, I wasn't saying you're a bad dancer.
Oh, you can. You can totally say that.
You're a good dancer. You actually...
I'm sure Chris is a good dancer for his time, right? We're only as good as the generation we were in when we learned how to dance, which usually is a lot of snapping the fingers and rocking back and forth. But hey, he can try.
In the past, his daughter Taylor, who was a dancer in school, sometimes for projects, she would have to choreograph and rehearse, and Chris would rehearse with Taylor, and you crushed it. You can memorize a routine.
Dance like nobody's watching. Actually, I dance like everybody's watching. Bring it on.
That's the most relatable thing he's ever said. I too dance like everybody's watching. On the cruise ship over the weekend, we did one of those silent discos where you put headphones on, and the whole time I'm dancing, and people are like taking videos of us, and I'm like, what are we doing here? If someone's taking a video of me, I feel like so self-conscious with my dance moves. Either way, I want to give them credit. At the very least, I can give them good credit for the audio. It is a professional sounding podcast.
It was a phenomenal wedding. We were really, really honored to be there. Just to celebrate Colton and his love with Jordan, who we had never met.
I think one of my favorite parts of the wedding was feeling like we got to see this window into Colton and Jordan's relationship. We'd heard such great things about Jordan, but to be able to hear their vows, to see friends and family give toasts about them, we learned a lot more. And that's one thing I love about going to a wedding, especially when like the toasts are really heartfelt and emotional. And, you can't go too inside jokey with a toast because then you lose your crowd. That's a tip.
One guy did. We'll explain later.
No, we won't rat him out. No, he did his best. But when you can share a little bit, it makes the guests feel like, okay, I know them better now. And I walked away from the weekend feeling that way.
It was important for me to be there to support Colton. This is a journey, I hate to say, from the show.
Well, you can hear Chris actually, his voice is breaking up here as he talks about his journey. And what we're going to hear is that Chris Harrison, very much similar to Colton Underwood in the sense they've both been ostracized from a community that they received their identity from.
The journey that he and I had been on and gotten to know each other and become friends, obviously, when he was the Bachelor. And then so much has been talked about and made of everything that happened subsequently. And his coming out. Now, I'll never forget, him taking me to breakfast and us sitting down, him coming out to me, going through this journey with him, which was not perfect and incredibly painful and difficult for him, difficult for a lot of people. And to watch him grow and own who he was and is, and then to find joy and love and to be embraced by his family and friends. When he asked us to be there, it was important for me to be there and support him and show him that love, and that I have been on this full circle journey with him. And it's amazing that he got to this point where he is.
I was very touched to have been invited, especially when I found out we were the only ones from Bachelor Nation there. What really made my heart happy over the weekend was, and I was surprised how many people came up to you, just guests at the wedding or, friends and family, and talked about like the season. They kind of went back to Colton's season on the show. And what several people said was, well, Colton always talked about how you, Chris, were there for him during that season when nobody else was. And that as your partner just made me so happy to hear, because, like anybody you love in your life, when you hear other people talk them up, it makes you feel good.
And what's crazy, too, is like we were talking about the issues with Cassie, but it goes so much farther back when he basically was quitting the show. Here's just a 5 or 10 second clip. Probably the most dramatic thing that has ever happened on The Bachelor. I mean, let me know, is there something more dramatic? Ari's season had some high drama, but I mean, Colton Underwood literally quit the show. This is a very Truman Show-like. The show is so controlled by producers and assistants and trackers. They always know where everybody is at all times. And here he is, I believe in Portugal, jumping the fence, and Chris Harrison goes, he jumped the effing fence. And the music.
Colton.
How good is this music? And there he goes.
He just jumped the fence.
And then Chris goes, he just jumped the effing fence. And that might have been the pinnacle high water mark for the show. Chris Harrison, he just goes, he just jumped the effing fence. I mean, that really was. It would have been great when Colton and his now husband said their vows if they walked off and there was a fence there and they both symbolically jumped the fence together. That would have been nice. Who knew that would have been? I mean, what a story. I mean, that's the type of clip as you're shooting it. The producers are like, hey, do we get that on camera? Like, yeah, we got that on camera. And the producers are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because they obviously don't care about them.
And so everybody kept saying that to you. And I don't think I really realized that the depth of how much that was felt, that they said you were the one like through the fence jumping all that. Colton always said, well, Chris was there for me when maybe producers or other people weren't.
I didn't talk about this with you. I was a little nervous entering that arena.
Going to the wedding?
Yeah. So we got to Napa, and the first night, Friday night, there was this kind of get together at the Carneros Spa and Resort where we were.
Yes, a welcome party. Carneros Inn, beautiful property.
And so everybody was kind of together at this resort. They had the entire resort in lockdown. It was wonderful that we had the whole place to ourselves. And so they had this kind of yard barbecue festival thing and wine and drinks and all that, a little get together. I was a little nervous when I walked in. I wasn't sure how I would be accepted. I was a little worried that people might have a negative connotation associated with me and the show and Colton's time on the show. And that was a very difficult part of his life. And I thought, am I an example of that? And I was a little worried that people would be a little standoffish or maybe even make some snide comments. Instead, as you just said, it was the opposite. And we walked in and we got really lucky because we walked in and Colton and Jordan happened to be standing right there.
Well, I think they were greeting everyone.
Well, they had been walking around, I saw. And then when we walked in, they just kind of walked up and Colton saw us. And I saw the look on his face and he kind of melted and got emotional that we were there. And he just gave me a huge hug and he looked fantastic, as he always does, ridiculously handsome and fit. And he immediately grabbed his fiance, Jordan, and brought Jordan over because I had never met Jordan. I've heard so much about him and Colton's talked about him, but until you meet him, and he is just this warm, charismatic, just loving, caring person. And we'll talk more about him,
and I'll cut it off there. The tell-all from Colton's wedding. So the most interesting part for me, and again, I'm only listening to the first portion of this here, is that Chris Harrison himself felt nervous to attend an arena where he was kind of, or could have been villainized, as far as he was part of the show that Colton obviously did not find success on ultimately. And again, if you take away all the collateral damage and just look at Colton's story, going through that whole process to come out and find out who he is actually a very beautiful thing. Like I said before, though, the issue is, and you can blame a lot of different issues. The issue is in part religious, the religious culture that, and I'm not sure exactly about his church, but he was raised in a church where I believe he had a hard time accepting who he was, because it wasn't what maybe his the people in his church had thought that he should have been. So he always tried to live up to something he wasn't. Now, I still think he's probably searching for, he's trying to monetize. He tried to sell the wedding. He obviously sold the Netflix show and he monetized the coming out and this and that. And I can't necessarily blame someone in today's world. Everything's monetized. And of course, Chris Harrison monetized his podcast interview. But you really look at him and I'm sure he's a sweet guy, but also very calculated. And of course, the collateral damage there was what happened with Cassie. We've discussed it ad nauseum, and the people in the comment section sure are not done talking about it. But with all that said, I do wish him happiness. And maybe somewhere down the line, he'll actually address the situation more and come at it from a place where he's kind of looking back on it with his own regrets. Who knows? Chances are that's not going to happen. They, signed an NDA. My guess is he paid Cassie a good chunk of money to never talk about this. Of course, charges were dropped when they could have very easily been prosecuted. He did do something that is illegal. It is illegal to place a tracking device on a car that is not yours and on a car that is not part of your work. And I'm pretty sure Cassie wasn't working for him, right? They had broken up at that point. Her brother found the tracking device. How scary. Trust me, it's very scary. All right. Anyway, there's his story. We'll have more content for you coming right after this.